Welcome, Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast with Bruce Hutcheon, episode number 090.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutcheon.
As well. Gary Shear comes from us from the Hillsboro, Wisconsin area. Been an avid hunter and outdoorsman for over 50 years. Gary graduated from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse with a BS in chemistry and worked in the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission for over 30 years. He retired in 2014. He started hunting in the early 60s, following his dad, Harry, on squirrel hunts. He couldn't wait to start deer hunting, and when he turned 12 years old, he was old enough to carry a gun, a Winchester Model 94 30-30. He's been hooked ever since and hasn't missed a season in over 50 years. His first deer was a small 8-point when he was 14 years old.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is Bruce Hutcheon, your host. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to have Gary Shear phone today with me, and we're going to interview him. Gary's father, Harry, was one of the men that influenced me into the world of the outdoors and specifically hunting. Gary, say hello to the folks.
Hello.
So, Gary, let's just jump right into the tradition of the hunt, where that came from and what it means to you.
Well, a lot like you, Bruce. My dad is the one who got me started in hunting. I can remember back when I was, 4 or 5 years old, he started me out tagging along squirrel hunting, and he always allowed us to go out and shoot. And, we were fortunate to grow up in a relatively rural area. So, you just step out the back door basically and you go shoot 22s and BB guns and things like that. And then as soon as I was old enough, 12 years old, he started allowing me to go whitetail hunting with him. And, probably about the time I met you, Bruce, back at that time. And, it took me a couple of years. I remember my first buck was up on the home farm over by Union Center, Wisconsin, and got a little 8-point one day, and just ever since, I just have had the bug. It's one of the most important things to me in my life, and I took up bow hunting back probably 35 years ago, and bow hunting has really become a passion for me as well. I spend a lot of time bow hunting, and recently retired about 7 months ago, so that's allowed me to, last fall focus and, spend more time on the food plots and tree stands and, all the things that go along with it. So, whitetail hunting has really just been a very important part of my life, and, hope to have it continue to be that way.
Thanks for sharing that, Gary. Listeners, if you haven't read my bio up on the webpage, Harry and Adonite were the two gentlemen that introduced me to hunting, as I said on the lead-in. And Harry, just a fantastic guy, and he's taught me so much, and obviously he's taught Gary a lot. What are the couple of things when you were just starting out that your dad taught you?
Well, I think probably the number one first thing was the importance of, being patient and, making sure you remain still and things like that. Back when I started hunting back in the early mid-'60s, or late 60s, I guess it would be, there weren't a lot of whitetails. And so it wasn't like you'd go out and every day see, 10 or 15 whitetails. You may go all day and not see a whitetail. So probably the number one thing was the patience. And the other thing I think was, probably respect for the animal. If you always tried to make a good, humane shot, and if you weren't sure on that shot, you made sure that you did a good job of getting out and looking and making sure that, if you hit it, that you tracked it, and if you didn't hit it, you were sure of that. So I guess those are probably the two main things that, getting started that he taught me.
Let's go fast forward and talk about your acquisition, one of the 40 you share with Harry, and then the 160 that you and your brothers and other family members hunt. Let's talk about the evolution of owning your own land and what you've done to it to make it a real productive piece of ground for whitetail hunting.
Yeah, well, back in 1982, my dad and I purchased 40 acres, just outside of town. And, it was the same thing. I think that was one thing that my dad envisioned years ago, the difficulty of having access to property to hunt. So, neither one of us were real financially secure, but we saw the importance of that. So we bought the first 40 back in 1982, and we did a lot of different hunting on it. And since that time, we put in some food plots and tried to selectively cut some trees and do some things like that to improve habitat. Then about, 10, 12 years later, my brothers and I, two brothers, bought 160 acres, about a half a mile from here. And we've really focused on that piece of property. It's a little larger and more fields. And so there again, we've selectively logged that to try to improve habitat, developed some food plots. Right now we have rented out some of the property for to a crop farmer, so he does a pretty good job of rotating crops and keeping, hay, soybeans, corn, and then we supplement that some with whitetail feed and mineral and things like that. And we try to minimize our impact on it by certain areas we've created what we call refuges or whatever that we just don't go into to try to allow a comfort zone, bedding areas and stuff for the deer. In terms of tree stands, we've tried to minimize our impact that way as well. We pretty much leave stands up year round. Of course, we check them every fall to make sure they're safe, but so we're not in there a lot. And when the farmer goes in a couple times a year, that's about the primary impact. I do have trail cams out. I do go check those occasionally, but so it's kind of developed over the years. And then I bought another 40 a couple of years ago. It's a ways away from here, about 15 miles away, and that's where we live now. And I've tried to do the same thing over there, minimize impacts, and we rent some of that land as well, so the farmer keeps some crops in there, and it's turned out to be a pretty good piece of property as well. So, and we try not to shoot small bucks. We'll talk a little bit about the kids. We do let the kids, when they first get started, shoot their first deer. But after that, we try to maintain more of a mature buck, hopefully 3.5 or better buck, and it's really improved the quality of deer that we've been harvesting the last several years.
On the 40 you and Harry have and the 160, just share with the audience what class of deer was on those properties when you acquired them quite a number of years ago.
Well, I think the class of deer back then would have been, primarily 1.5-year-old deer. They're, occasionally you'd get maybe a 2.5. But the deer were, weren't able to live long enough to reach any sort of maturity. And So over the years, we've, like I say, we've kind of understood the importance of managing that herd. We do take our fair share of does. I think, we like to shoot a big buck, but we also like to have the meat. So I think we've really improved the quality of the deer we're seeing and harvesting. And again, I think that primarily by being selective in what we're shooting and harvesting.
Let's talk about Harry's biggest deer to date. What was it, 2 years ago? He harvested his largest deer.
Yeah, I think that was 2 years ago, maybe 3. But yeah, he's sitting up there. He's 79 and doesn't get around quite as well as he used to. So we set up a hunting blind up in the woods that he can easily walk to, and he spends a lot of time hunting there. And he's had real good luck up in it's kind of a valley on this 40. And I think, it was opening morning 2 or 3 years ago. He had 2 nice bucks come through, actually, and he harvested this one. And for him, it was a real nice buck. I think anybody would be happy with it. It was probably a 130 to 140 class deer, and so it was a nice deer, and he was pretty proud of it.
Listeners, Harry likes to shoot deer and many deer drives that we've been on. If a buck gets up, it's going down. Is that right, Gary?
I think that's true. He's really amazed me with some of the shots that he's been able to make, and he's like I say, he pretty much learned to hunt on his own, and all of the the techniques and things that he's used over the years are maybe a little bit more old school, you might say, but he's a good shot, and rarely would a deer get up and go anywhere after he took the shot.
What's the largest class of deer or score, I guess the right way to say it, that you've taken on any of your hunts, wherever you hunted whitetails?
Well, the biggest that I've ever taken was about a 150, and that was over on our 160. We have harvested a 170 plus, 172, 173 over there. And frankly, I've got some pictures that I think would go up in that range now, but I haven't seen them. But the biggest one I've ever gotten was in the 150 class.
Let's talk about your trail cameras. You made it quite specific that you really don't go on the 160 much at all during the year. How do you pull the cards, or is it up on the antenna system?
No, it's not up on the antenna system. I do have to go in, but I do have them located in areas where I'm able to get to them with very little impact. And I don't have any in the areas that we consider to be the refuge areas or whatever. In the spring, I'll set up some mineral licks and things, and I'll put cameras on those, and then later in the fall, I'll go up there, early fall. When I start seeing some scrapes and stuff, then I'll set them up on those scrapes to see what kind of bucks we've got. But I really don't get down too much into the thicker areas. I stay up on the ridge and, just get what I can get from pictures that I can get off from, the ridge areas and the easily accessible areas.
When do you think the turning point was on the 160 to go from a 2.5-year-old buck to mature bucks? Now we're talking 3.5, 4.5, and older bucks on that piece of property.
Yeah. Well, I think it probably took us, I would say maybe 5 years, maybe 3-5 years to start to consistently see, the bigger deer, and we still remain somewhat selective, and but since that time, and with the addition of getting in some food plots and things like that, we've been seeing a lot better deer and consistently seeing better deer. So I guess again, 3 to 5 years is probably what it took to start seeing those deer mature.
Let's talk about the refuge system that you have set up. One, how large it is, and two, why it's critical to growing big deer and having a balanced herd.
Well, I would guess we have a couple of refuge areas. They're probably, maybe a total of 30 acres. I'm just guessing, but 30 acres. And I think it's important to have that a place where, those bigger bucks can get into and feel secure and not be pushed out all the time. I think a deer, a lot of deer will tolerate a time or two of being jumped, but if somebody's in there frequently, they're going to go find someplace else to go. And this cover is, we keep it thick, and like I said, we've logged and done some things to improve those areas, and we don't even put logging roads through them. And so those areas, we'll go in and cut some trees and things, but we don't go in and make big open areas. And those areas are thick and good bedding areas, and I think it's important to, like I said earlier, for the deer to have a place where they can feel comfortable, secure, and not feel like, they're going to get run out every other day.
Let's talk about your neighbors on the 160 and the 240s that you have. The relationship with them, and are they just strictly, if it's a deer, it's going down?
Well, I think a lot of the people that are our neighbors, well, several of our neighbors don't even hunt. So we worked out arrangements with some of those people to, we built their fences, for example, so we have access, exclusive access to their property. And as you know, Bruce, a lot of our neighbors around here are Amish. The Amish that do hunt pretty much shoot anything that's out there. But fortunately, in this particular area, most of the Amish don't hunt. And I've got other neighbors that are trying to do the same kind of thing that we're doing. So I think that as well has helped, the deer population in terms of quality. There's lots of deer, but the quality has really improved. So we have good relationships with the neighbors, and like I say, I would say better than half of them don't even hunt, and it allows us access to probably a total of 500 to 600 acres this way.
Thanks for sharing that. Listeners, you're getting some good tips how it takes a number of years to start seeing the A-class deer that you want to see on your property, but also the importance to get to know your neighbors, because I know the whole Shear family has done that. Harry's very active in the area, doing some work and doing some bartering and some trading. So that's important, because one thing we're finding out on the show that sometimes neighborhood relations aren't the best, and that hurts everybody. Gary, have you ever heard of Quality Deer Management, QDMA?
Yes, I have.
Now, is your land enrolled in their program, or do you follow their precepts? Because it sounds like you do.
Yeah, we do follow their precepts, and when we first bought the 160, I think my brother Marv enrolled us, whatever, you had to do. We had the signs and things up, but we haven't actively been involved with that. We've been doing it ourselves. I read a lot about it, and we all read a lot about it. And so I think we practice, most of what the QDMA recommends and stuff, but we aren't, actively, I guess you'd say, participating in it at this time.
Share with us a couple of funny stories, and they might not have been funny when they happened, but after you get back to the shed or you're hanging out at Fishy's or wherever, and all of a sudden you say, boy, this happened to me and I was X, but now you look back and it's funny. Share a couple of those stories with us.
Oh gosh, there's probably lots of them, and I think you're touching on something that's really important about hunting as well, and that's the camaraderie that goes along with it. Stories that I'm kind of drawing a blank on some of that. I mean, we've had lots of good stories. I guess, where one thing I can think of is I've shot a couple of nice bucks that, my brother-in-law hunts with us, Doug, and he passed on these deer, and, I'd see them either at some point later or whatever, and, I would take the deer, and then afterwards he's like, oh, man, I let that go. And I said, Doug, that's not one I'm letting go. And, these are 3.5-year-old deer. And, so, things like that is probably, one of the things that's kind of funny that occurs. I don't know. I guess I'm drawing blanks, Bruce, on
okay.
The other
that's
funny
fine.
stuff.
We'll move right along. Why do you think your brothers are so much in archery and gun hunting as you are?
Well, I don't know. I think it's just a progression. I've found, actually my youngest brother, Marv, was the first to really get started into archery. And, he's the one that sort of, I guess, introduced the rest of us. My dad never really, archery hunted much until, just a few years ago when he started using crossbow. And I think it's the, somewhat the increased challenge, the ability to be out there more. The bow season is so long. And again, here in Wisconsin, in our area particularly, we're very lucky to be able to harvest multiple deer per year. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And, and again, when my youngest brother Marv started bow hunting, it kind of gave us another opportunity to we do spend a lot of time together as family hunting, and it gave us another opportunity to spend time hunting and pursuing deer.
Let's talk about a couple aha moments where you're kind of frustrated, can't figure things out, where this deer is coming through or not, or how come they're not eating, this alfalfa or clover, anything along that line. Why don't you share a couple of those scenarios with our listeners?
Well, I think over the years there's been a number of moments that, you learn as you're out there. One of the aha moments that I think that struck me, a number of years back is, again, there for a while, I always wanted to hunt, even in archery, I wanted to hunt in a tree where I could see, far and all that kind of thing. And I think, I realized that, how come, I'm not seeing these bigger bucks coming by and stuff because I know they're here. And one of the things I learned is I needed to get in just a little bit into some thicker cover, and instead of having big open, more open areas to hunt, you had to take time to cut some shooting lanes, and maybe you couldn't shoot 360, but you had some key areas to shoot. That was kind of an aha moment for me that improved my ability to shoot some better deer. I think, other things that have occurred to me is, the importance, particularly archery hunting, of giving that deer some time. I've shot deer where I thought, I had, the perfect double lung shot, and, I'd get down and go after that deer, and, generally I'd recover it, but I'd recover it after jumping it a couple of times, and that's when I learned, especially with archery hunting, I think you need to give that deer, 30 minutes or maybe even more, and again, back to patience and relaxing to give that deer and that arrow the opportunity to do what it's supposed to do.
Let's stay right on archery. And how much do you practice, and what type of bow do you use? Broadheads, arrows? Talk about your your gear and the amount of time you practice?
Well, I shoot a Hoyt bow, and I've been using Rage double blade 100-grain broadheads for the last few years. My arrows are Easton Axis, which I've been real happy with. I generally practice, throughout the year. I haven't practiced a lot here this spring, but now the summer and stuff, I start practicing more. We go to 3D shoots, things like that to help, keep us, tuned in and things like that. So, the Hoyt that I shoot is the Carbon Element, and been real happy with that bow, and had good results. So, but I practice pretty much year round. I probably don't practice a lot, from say December to March. We'll do some indoor shooting, but for the most part, it's starts in the spring and then really ramps up towards later summer.
How close are the deer to you when you take your shot?
Rarely will I take a shot beyond 30 yards. The vast majority of the deer I've shot have been probably 15 to 25. I have killed some deer at 35 or 40, but like I said, it's pretty rare for me to have a shot that long because of the areas where I hunt. I do hunt some field edges, but I have to I got to make real sure that I know my distances because that can be deceiving. And but rarely will I shoot beyond 30 yards. And like I said, vast majority have been 15 to 25.
Let's talk about the terrain that the 160 is and the 240s that you have.
Well, they're all rolling hills, fairly deep valleys, wooded ridges and hillsides, and then we've got on the 160 there's a creek that runs through there and several springs. The property, the other 40 behind my house that I most recently bought, that's very similar, rolling hills, maybe 20 acres of tillable land, and then the valleys and the ridges are wooded, and I've got several springs on that particular piece of property. So they're pretty much nothing flat, but the ridge tops are relatively flat. But beyond that, you have to hope that deer doesn't run downhill after you get him.
And those hills, they're small, but they're steep.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're not mountains like people are used to out west, but they're steep and wooded and thick. So I think that keeps the deer hanging the ridge lines and the ridge tops, which is which is what you learn, and you learn how to hunt that.
Let's talk about scent control. How important to you is it, and what's your 3 or 4 keys to having good scent control?
Well, I think it's almost number one. We learned again years ago about the importance of scent control. I remember being at might have been a deer classic many years ago, and scent lock was first coming out, and we happened to stop by the booth and talk with the guys that had developed scent lock, and we ended up we all bought the first kind of army green undergarment things, and since that time I've never hunted without something like scent lock. I'm very careful, always shower. If I go out morning, if I go out afternoon, I'll take 2 showers. All of my clothes are washed in scent-free soap and stored in scent-free containers. I think it's probably maybe almost the number one most important thing to be paying attention to. It can be kind of a lot of work, but it really helps. And so I really believe in scent control, and I've spent a fair amount of money on getting the scent control types of clothing.
What type of boots do you use?
I use rubber. I haven't used the scent lock boots and stuff that I have. I use all rubber boots. Those are all stored, away from everything else as well. I also use scent, the scent spray to, before I go out, I spray my gear down, I spray my clothes down. Make sure the boots are good and sprayed down. So when you're walking in, I've witnessed many times deer walk right down my trail. So I think I'm being reasonably successful there.
Gary, we're coming up on the point of the show where I have an open mic, so anything that you'd like to share with our listeners about the hunting tradition, about what hunting means to you, and any favorite gear manufacturers or books you read, anything along that lines. We just got a couple minutes here before we wrap up.
All right. Well, like I said earlier, hunting is probably is almost the number one most important part of my life. It gives me the most enjoyment of pretty much anything I do. In terms of books and things, some of the books by Bill Weinke, I think he does a real nice job, and I think those are the ones that come to mind. Product-wise, I like the Hoyt bows, and probably be in line for a new one next year. Like I said, I just think hunting is really important. It's a great tradition. It keeps family together. And, it's like we've gotten all of our children hunting, and, they all do it at various levels. Some are really into it, like my brothers and I, and some of them, get out when they can. So, just really important part of all of our lives and our family lives.
Gary Shear, thank you so much for being a guest on Whitetail Rendezvous. And I can't wait to the fall, and I'm hanging out with you guys, and we're having some fun. With that, thank you so much, listeners, for listening to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.